After experience 30 years of very fast growth average of 9.7% of GDP growth rate, we in China also encountering tremendous challenges and difficulties. And these challenges is enabling us to make a thorough and comprehensive reflections about the modality of economic development as well as international trade. Our reflection focused on two major subjects. Number one, why we have achieved such a fast growth in the last 3 decades and become the third largest economy in the world today. And secondly, which is most importantly, is that in front of such great challenges, what China and other newly developing economies should do in encountering those unprecedented challenges in front of us. 30 years ago, everything in China was state-owned, especially a small restaurant or a barber's shop at the corner of the street. And now the private sector in China contributes half of Chinese GDP. And people estimated maybe in 5 to 10 years, the private sector in China will contribute 3/4 of China's GDP. This is kind of tremendous changes taking place in China and boost the fast growth of China's economic development. The second force that has driven China's economic development is the force of market. As 1.3 billion people know that if they can work hard, they can get better off. So the kind of reform initiated by Deng Xiaoping unleashed tremendous efforts on the part of the 1.3 billion Chinese, and the market force starts working in China. As a result, China became largest consumer countries in the world in many areas. We consume about 20% of the steel of the world, 40% of the cement, and 20% of the wheat. And now the economic recession, we have overtaken the United States as the biggest car sales countries in the world. So economic reform unleashed the market force, and the market force has bring tremendous domestic demand in China, which is driving China's economy. The third force that has driven China's fast economic growth is the force of globalization. Of course, it's a very controversial matter in talking about globalization. In China, we also think that it's a double-edged force. But we think that it's inevitable for any country, of course, including China, to face up the challenges and opportunities of globalizations. I think we, China, grasp the opportunities of globalization and develop China at a very fast rate. And in the last 3 decades, we've attracted millions, billions of foreign direct investment. And the last year alone, China attracted about $10 billion foreign direct investment. $100 billion foreign direct investment. And the foreign direct investment has contributed 20% of China's industrial output, 50% of China's export, and create 30 million jobs for the ordinary Chinese.
World trade must be well organized and predictable in order to prevent social and economic shocks and upheaval. And secondly, organized trade must be free, fair, and non-exploitative. Exploitation is unacceptable for ethical reasons, but it also causes poverty, which again fuels conflicts. I do believe that international trade and economic cooperation based on these principles and a framework of values and principles can contribute to peace. I believe so because fair trade based on ethical principles fosters economic, social, and political integration and interdependence, and growth that may contribute to alleviating poverty. However, even if economic integration through trade has deepened, we are today faced with a multitude of crises that feed on each other and threaten the political and economic cohesion of the global community. And these crises are at least four. It's a climate change crisis with serious negative consequences for development, rural livelihoods, and the planet's future and viability in general. It is a food security and hunger crisis. It is the oil and energy, and also energy price crisis. And last but not least, it's a financial and economic crisis. The consequences of these crises for development, peace, and stability, individually and even more so combined, could be devastating. And hence, there is an urgent need to develop effective counter strategies by governments and by business alike. The profound and deepening financial and economic crisis, which we should focus on here today, affects all countries and is a powerful example of the downside of global interdependency. The meltdown of the real estate and housing market goes to the core of individual security, prosperity, and future, with thousands of people losing their homes, suffering personal bankruptcies, and losing their jobs, especially now in developed countries. Even here in Norway, we have new figures of a strong increase of unemployment. Government responses to the crisis raise moral and political dilemmas. To put it bluntly, to simplify, saving the banks or saving the poor. Overall, there is a need for equity in policy making and allocation of public funds. This need points to a moral and ethical issue that may deserve broader analysis. Another ethical issue involved may be that virtually all countries followed one particular model of liberalization in the course of globalization, which is now at the root of the global crisis. This is why regulation and a relentless promotion of corporate ethical standards and awareness are so important.
So one of the things I tell my business students is that a way to help steer a society away from violence and toward peace is if their businesses can provide a value added to the economic environment in that country. So economic development is one, and the jobs that go with it. Another is rule of law. I'm not an empirical guy. I have a law degree and a PhD in theology, so I don't do empirical work very much. But I did do one study, and it showed that there was a clear correlation between corruption and violence, that exactly those countries that are the most corrupt are exactly the countries that tend to resolve disputes by violence. And if you want to see the backup of that, you can take a look at either of those Cambridge books that I mentioned to you, either The Role of Business in Fostering Peaceful Societies or Business Integrity and Peace, where we detail that study.